just thought I'd share with you guys just a little bit of information about Links to Success and why we created the series. So a lot of people are dealing with a lot of uncertainty right now, or just change in general. I know I have a few people very close to me that have been either laid off or furloughed during this time, and others are just looking for a change and a new opportunity in their career. So we wanted to help create a series that focused on topics that allow people to differentiate themselves in an already competitive market. And so some of the topics that we've already covered include, how to create a competitive resume, your job search as a whole, including networking strategies. Now, this week, we're going to talk about interviewing, as you all know, and our final topic next week is going to be salary negotiations. So definitely stay tuned with us through the entire series if you can.
Yeah, and your web series today is hosted by EdgeLink. You may be wondering, who is EdgeLink? We are a premier staffing firm specialized in technology. By specialized, I mean that's what we do day in and day out. It's all tech all day long. We are local to Denver and Portland. We're expanding an office in Salt Lake City as well. And we do have two different divisions, contract to hire, and then direct hire, permanent roles. Our motto is that we are in the business of positively impacting the lives of the people and the clients that we touch.
And some of you might be wondering, why work with an agency like EdgeLink, and what would that relationship necessarily look like? First thing I always like to remind people is keep in mind that for candidates, working with an agency like ours is completely free to use. So you're already doing so much in your job search to try to get the right opportunities for yourself and the things that you're looking for, that you owe it to yourself to get a more widespread knowledge of the market. And then on top of that, these individuals are the ones that are speaking with hiring managers and speaking with the companies that you're interested in. And so they're getting real-time updates on what it is that you're looking for. So it's important to keep in touch and make sure that they know exactly what it is that you're searching for as well. We want to get, as Jennifer said, we want to answer all of your questions as we can, and we're going to try to do that throughout the presentation during the Q&A section. However, if we don't get to it, or if you have any other questions that come up afterwards, please feel free to email us at info@edgelink.com for any more information that you might need.
Thanks, Iman. As I mentioned earlier, we are having some technical difficulties. Our speaker seems to be losing some connection. So give us just a few minutes. We're going to confer with her, get things set up, and we will be right back to you guys. So if you don't mind, hang in for just a second.
Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, I unmuted myself. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Josh. I'm so glad we were able to get that slide working. So I am Amy Miller. I have, as Jennifer mentioned, I have been recruiting for quite some time, working for a couple big names, and I do run a blog and a YouTube channel called Recruiting in Yoga Pants. Yes, I am wearing yoga pants today and every day. So we can go to the next slide, please. All right. So who am I? I think we already kind of covered this. Been at this a long time. I am a technical recruiter, not a technical person. Obviously, we've seen that in evidence very much today. And I've also conducted and held people's hands through literally thousands of interviews. I have seen interviews from every angle for over 20 years and have a lot of thoughts on how they work and how they should work. So I'm happy to bring that to you today and talk through some of the lessons learned and hopefully, most importantly, give y'all some specific actions that you can take as whether you're navigating a job search, whether you're involved in hiring and recruiting on any level, and just try to make this, give you something very applicable to your day job. So next. All right. So one of the biggest questions, especially if you're one of these very happy candidates, just doing your thing, happily ignoring every recruiter who calls you, why should I take this interview anyway? So for me, and I do this myself, maybe once a year or so, I often don't have any intention of leaving my employer or changing jobs. But I am interested in just learning. I think of interviews as, say, a fact-finding mission, right? Where I can go and learn a little bit about what my competition is doing. If it's a company maybe I've been interested in the past, I can, go take a look and kind of learn and see what's going on there. So it's a bit of a fact-finding mission sometimes for me. I think also secondarily is I am looking for an opportunity to just keep my interview skills sharp, because it is a skill. It is a skill set. It is it's something that if you don't do often, you kind of lose that edge. So I definitely like to just, kind of keep my skills sharp. But then also, this is all about learning and finding out data, right? Fact-finding mission is actually what I list here. And it's really, I want to just learn. I want to see if there's something better than what I'm currently doing. I want to know if there's an opportunity out there that I might want to at least know a little bit more about. A lot of times we look at this initial interview or this invitation to have a conversation as, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I'm not changing jobs. Well, of course not. You don't have an offer yet. It's a little early to say that. But this is an opportunity to network and learn and make some connections. Next slide.
And real quick, I don't mean to interrupt, Amy.
No,
David
please.
Davis, your camera is on. If you don't mind turning that off, that would be wonderful.
All right, awesome. And sorry, guys, I'm glad I called in on my phone because I, too, am having some serious internet connectivity issues. So I am following along as best I can, though. So let's see here. I'm actually reconnecting to the meeting, so I'm going to assume we're on the next slide, Jennifer.
Yes, ma'am, we are.
Okay, perfect. So how do I prepare? This is, and I've been guilty of this where I've just kind of, come into an interview or come into, a conversation with absolutely no preparation whatsoever. Like I've just been like, let's have a conversation. I'll just, whatever. I don't care. It doesn't matter. And that's not always the best option, to be honest. That can sometimes be, create later problems downstream if you ever wanted to revisit a company. But so what I do is I always start with the career stage. I want to learn, okay, well, what do you want me to know about you and your company and the interview process? So there's a lot of great insight out there, a lot of especially larger companies will put out videos or put out blog posts or, just to pick on my current employer, Amazon, we talk all the time about leadership principles. So those things are out there because we want you to be successful. So starting with that careers page, really kind of understanding how does a company view this process and how do they interview is really critical. I also have notes. I always take notes with me and I always encourage my candidates to have notes as well. Bring a notebook, bring your iPad, whatever it is. And what I want you to do is write down some stories, kind of pull out some of that information from your resume, from your background. A lot of companies do behavioral-based questions. Tell me about a time when. And so I always encourage people, write that stuff down. Have those answers ready to go. Think about different applications or things you've accomplished, tools that you've built, problems you've solved, all the cool stuff that we encourage you to put on your resume. Go ahead and jot down some of those scenarios and some of the key points. And generally speaking, the STAR method is never going to fail you. So situation, task, accomplishment, result. I think that's what action, result. Sorry. Situation, task, action, result. Because what we're looking for is that start to finish. We want to understand, so you had a situation, this was the thing you were tasked with doing, this was your part of the problem you're trying to solve, and then of course the result is key. We want to know how that ended. How did that go for you at the end? What was the result? What was kind of the outcome? Those are the things that we want to dig into. And it's not unusual for companies or for interviewers to then actually dig a little bit deeper. They want to actually peel back some of the layers of that answer. Okay, well, all right, so you saved 10% of your time by automating this feature. How did that impact the larger team? Things like that. So you're going to kind of get those questions, and so don't be afraid to have those notes in front of you. Don't rely on your memory. and really be able to dig in and provide a lot of context around that. And then finally, practicing, right? I actually, I do mock interviews with my family. When I'm preparing for an interview, I'll hand my husband some questions. So like, okay, fire these at me. I want to practice. Or if you ever are driving down the road next to me, you'll see me talking to myself. Maybe I'm singing, maybe I'm practicing an interview, who knows? But these are the kinds of things that we definitely want you to practice. And it's okay to go in a little polished and a little rehearsed. That is not a bad thing necessarily. So we can go to the next slide. If there's any specific questions, I'm happy to take them throughout this conversation for sure. So just let me know if there are questions. I'm actually not able to see the meeting. Unfortunately, my internet is being goofy, but happy to take questions, or we can just run to the next slide.
We're on the next slide, Amy, and we're going to save the questions for the end for your Q&A
Okay,
section.
perfect. All right, so next slide, recruiter prep calls. So most recruiters, look, there's always going to be a few bad apples. I can't do anything about that. Most recruiters want you to be successful. It is like they have not brought you all the way to this process and gotten you to this stage because they don't care if you make it or not. They desperately want you to be successful. I can tell you, one of my early, in my early years of recruiting, just a quick anecdote to kind of drive this point home. I was a very young recruiter, only a few years in the industry, found myself in executive search somehow, some way, and was recruiting for a retained search. It was for a CFO for a solar startup. So this is way back in the early 2000s. And we had, met with this client, and it was kind of this startup guy who's like a professional, startup guy, and he wanted to find his next CEO. So he was hiring a CFO. Plan was to make that person take over the company at some point once it got off the ground. And so it was a big deal. And so we did a lot of, discussion and kind of deep dive into what do you want? What does that look like? He specifically wanted somebody to come out of public utilities. And there was some logic behind that. And he did not care that this person didn't have startup experience. He specifically wanted someone who didn't have it because he could teach that, but he couldn't teach public utilities, city codes, relationships, so on and so forth. So we find the perfect guy. I will call him Cliff. That's not his name, but I can see his face. He cost me $30,000. So Cliff, great fit coming out of public utilities. He's been a high-level finance guy. He's got it all. He's great. And so I go to do my prep call with him. And Cliff says to me, Amy, I've been interviewing and applying for jobs since you were in diapers. I don't need your help. I've got this. Thank you very much. And so me being this, baby recruiter who was afraid to push back, working in my first, kind of big kid gig, said, oh, okay, if you're sure. So guess who went and blew the interview? That would be Cliff. So all the things that I wanted him to avoid, the landmines about, don't worry that you don't have, no startup experience. The client doesn't care about that. Really focus on these things in your background that the client really likes. All the things that I wanted to walk him through and prepare him for, he never heard because he refused to listen to me. So as you can imagine, Cliff did not get the job. I did not make a placement. And our client, our angel investor startup guy, was super disappointed because he really liked Cliff on paper. He thought Cliff was great. It was the perfect background. Like, this was all great. But unfortunately, Cliff spent a significant amount of time in the interview reminding our client, well, I haven't worked in a startup before. Well, I'd have to get up to speed on this. We knew all that. We could have talked through that. We could have prepared for that and positioned that in a way that would have landed better. But unfortunately, it left our client with just a lot of insecurity that Cliff was right for the job. So that's just one example. I've got a million more, but one example of why that prep call is so important. Listen to your recruiters, ask them questions. Ideally, a recruiter is able to give you not only what to expect, some of those weird little nuances, some company or team specific things like our solar guy and Cliff. Also, how long is the day? I mean, sometimes it's just very logistical, kind of tactical stuff. Like, okay, you're going to meet with these people and it's going to last this long, and things like that. We want to be able to give you who you'll meet and their titles. Now, quick caveat here: every company is a little bit different, but I can tell you from experience that there are some companies that do not want their employees' full name shared. So I've gotten this pushback before where they're like, well, why can't I have, names and titles and all this stuff for the people I'm meeting? Typically, that is a specific company policy. So it's, if you do get that kind of pushback, don't take it personally. It's just one of those kind of weird things that some companies do because they're trying to protect their their people. But we should be able to give you at least a high level, kind of, hey, you're going to meet Joe and he's a software development manager, right? So we should be able to give you at least that much. And this is also a great time to talk through any questions with your recruiter. Always recommend having some specific questions in mind. There are certainly, some things we kind of expect you to know going into these interviews. We want you to kind of have, you should know who the company is. You should know what they do, things like that. But an example of a great question is, what will this person, if it's me that you hire, what will I accomplish in the first, 30, 60, 90 days that will, tell you that I was the right person for the job? Or what does success in this role look like? The best person on the team, what do they do that's so different? Things like that. I mean, you want to kind of wordsmith those a little bit better for your own style and the scenario that you're in. But, ideally, we want you to be inquisitive. We want you to be curious. And we are certainly, as recruiters, willing to kind of walk through those questions with you and kind of give you some guidelines and some great questions to ask. So don't be afraid to ask for those as well. All right, next slide. We're flying through these a bit, but it means we're going to have some time for Q&A. All right, so after the interview, this I think is one of the more challenging ones. One of the biggest frustrations is not having a clear timeline, not having a clear, kind of, okay, well, now what? That can be incredibly frustrating. That can be, it's the least favorite part, honestly, is the waiting game. So kind of hate that, but we also understand it's a necessary evil. Here's what I want you to ask your recruiter. Ask for a specific timeline. They may not have a specific, like, oh yeah, it's definitely, this, I'm definitely going to have an answer by that day. However, they should be able to give you enough of kind of a heads up or an idea of what timing looks like for their clients or for their hiring manager, so you can kind of get a sense of when you can expect an answer. So, obviously a little grace is good here because timelines can, shift and things do happen. But the key here is just trying to confirm as best you can, when do we expect to make a decision? When do we think this is going to happen? So, and yes, we love thank yous. There's always, you can ask 10 recruiters, you're going to get 17 different answers, right? What is, should people send thank you cards? Should we, bother with an email? Especially if you're not able to get everyone's contact info, like, oh, are they even going to get me, information that I can send a thank you or a thank you email. send it to the recruiter. I promise you the right people will get to see it. I promise you. They will see it. But thank yous are great because it just kind of gives us an indicator that, yeah, you are really interested. That you are, you want to hear about next steps, you want to take the next step. So that's great. So we do love thank yous. And then, sometimes the answer is no, right? So I'm going to touch on that really quickly. Sometimes we don't get the result that we wanted. We're not getting an offer. And a lot of companies, and this is super frustrating for recruiters as well as, I promise you, it's frustrating for us as well as for you, but we are not always able to give you feedback. We cannot always say, well, this is why, the coding expertise wasn't up to par, or somebody didn't like your shoes. Like, that would be a ridiculous piece of feedback. But you know what I'm saying? Like, our minds go everywhere and we think, oh my gosh, it's, we kind of armchair quarterback this all day long and try to pick apart what went wrong or why the interviewers were wrong and not picking me and all those kinds of things. Unfortunately, you're not necessarily going to get anything specific. You're not always going to get actual actionable feedback, which stinks. Here's what you can do, especially if it's a larger company or if you're working through a recruiting agency who has a number of clients that may be hiring something similar to you or someone similar to you. If it's a no for one particular role, okay, moving on. What's next? Are there other teams that I could be considered for? Are there other roles with different companies you might be working with or a recruiting agency might be working with that I can be considered for? These are some good indicators, right? I know for me, we get a lot of near misses. I happen to recruit for a very specialized organization. Our requirements are incredibly stringent. I mean, it's space applications, it's hardware engineering. It's a really specialized area. That doesn't mean that someone we've interviewed may not fit somewhere else in Amazon. Or if I'm an agency recruiter, that may not mean that you might not be an amazing silver medalist that can get gold with the next company. So don't be afraid to ask that question. Ask your recruiter, if this isn't a fit and this is a no, great, understood, take any feedback I can get, but is there another opportunity? Is there a different organization we could look at, a different team? You may not get the answer you're looking for there either, and we can certainly debate and pick apart what that might mean, but for the most part, recruiters do want to make a placement. We do want to close roles. We do want to get the right people hired at the right places. So if you're open to keeping in touch, if you're open to a second conversation, the way that you're presenting yourself and conducting yourself from start to finish, including through rejection, is huge. And I know, I've got a couple in my pipeline right now where we weren't able to move forward with a specific rec, but just because they were so gracious and so great to work with, and I believe that these are genuinely amazing potential employees, I'm doing everything I can to help get them to the next step or the next stage, even if it's not with me. So if it's a no, that's okay. We may or may not pick apart why, but what's next? Is there a cooling off period, perhaps? Maybe I need to come back a year from now. That's okay. And that, again, can be a company policy. Google is pretty notorious for that. So it's okay to ask your recruiters those kinds of questions, and just keep in mind that a lot of times we're the messenger. we're just delivering information. We're not necessarily decision makers or have heavy involvement in that, but we do want to make sure that we're helping you get aligned to a better opportunity if it makes sense to do so. And then finally, this is always, I said this as we kicked off the call, and I think it bears repeating, you can't turn down an offer you don't have. So again, at every step of the way here, throughout the process, throughout deciding if I should take the interview, preparing for the interview, the goal is to get an offer in your hand. That's it. Number one, far and away, above anything else, you want to get an offer. Once you have an offer, or once you have a positive outcome and you know that there's a specific next step coming, now you can start thinking, okay, have I gathered enough data? Do I have what I need to make a decision? Because this is really what this all is, right? Both sides of the equation are on a fact-finding mission. The company wants to get to know you, learn if you're the right kind of person for the role, if you're the right kind of, have the right skill set, can accomplish the right things. You're also doing a fact-finding mission. You're on your own, digging and learning and asking questions. So now that you have an offer in hand, hopefully, you can now kind of turn inwards and say, okay, do I have what I need to make this decision? And there's follow-up calls and things that you can do that we can address another time. but that's the goal, is getting to that stage, and then it becomes, now we can dig in and ask more questions. So next slide. All right. Oh, it looks like we are at Q&A right on time. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Amy, for all of for imparting your wisdom on us. Through the whole presentation that you gave today, you were mentioning working with recruiters and the benefit of working with recruiters. Obviously, I hold that in high regard myself. But I also like to point out that the things that you mentioned, writing thank you notes and asking the right questions, these are all things that you can do even if you're applying for a job that doesn't have access to a recruiter. And a source 100%. Like that.
Yeah, absolutely. At any point of the, regardless of who it's with or, whatever, I mean, there should be a point of contact, right? Whether it's someone like Jennifer or myself, or, maybe it's the hiring manager directly. I mean, it could vary, but yeah, absolutely. I think it's just critical to have someone who's acting as your advocate. And I think Jennifer and I would both raise our hand and say, 100%, we want you to be successful. We're here to help you. Help us, help you.
Help me, help you.
Yeah.
Well, we have a lot of questions coming in, Amy, so I'm going to read off the first one for you, and then we're going to have Amon join us as well. I just, first of all, want to say thank you, everybody, for sticking with us. I know we had some technical difficulties today. If you go back and watch the rest of our recordings, there have been no technical difficulties in the past, so we do have a good track record. And I apologize for that, and thank everybody for sticking with us. Our first question, let's see, this is from Arlo White. Arlo's asking, if you have lots of knowledge related to a simple question, should you show off and go on tangents, or how much should you try to direct the conversation to your strengths versus letting them drive the interview? Great question.
Oh, Arlo, this is a good one. Oh my. Okay. So I think the answer lies somewhere in the middle. I think that, part of the interview discovery process is this somebody I want to work with? Is this somebody that is humble, hard worker, willing to kind of, come in and get their hands dirty a little bit? So 100% yes, we do want you to show off a little. I mean, this is your opportunity to brag, but I've also seen this backfire. I've actually heard feedback in my career, not recently, but in the past. Boy, that guy was a know-it-all. I will never be able to coach that person. They will not take feedback. I will not be able to. So I think you want to find the balance, right? So I think, one way to position that is, hey, this is a great question. I definitely feel like I've got some really broad expertise here. The specific answer to this specific question is this. If you'd like me to go deeper, I certainly can, right? So I think you can kind of say like, oh, I've got a lot of knowledge here without kind of running down that rabbit hole and risking maybe kind of putting a sour taste in the interviewer's mouth. I hope that helps, Arlo. Was that kind of what you were looking for, or did that give you some clarity? We're going to assume yes, but, feel free to weigh in otherwise.
Thank you. Our next question says, is working with recruiters a good way to set up informational interviews?
It can be, right, for sure. And I think that may look differently if it's an external recruiter versus an internal recruiter. I personally am, obviously a fan of kind of the three-way networking, which is network with recruiters, network with potential peers at companies you want to work for, and network with hiring managers. So I think the question is, what do you want to get out of it? Now, the benefit to going through a recruiter is that the recruiter often has that credibility with a very, very busy hiring manager. So I know and I'm sure, my colleagues here on the call would attest to the same thing. I've been able to convince a manager to talk to someone that they wouldn't have taken a chance on paper. Because my reputation, my, the trust they have in me is like, well, if Amy thinks I should talk to this person, yeah, maybe I will. So yes, I don't think it's the only way, but I absolutely, yes, do think it's a good way.
Perfect. And she mentioned networking. That's our topic from last week. So if you do want to catch yourself up on our previous recordings, we'll let you know where you can find those in an email that you'll receive after our session today. So, sorry, Josh, I'm going to skip your question. Chris is asking for tips for someone who hasn't interviewed for 25 years. So maybe some more recent things that you think have changed over the last few years since you've been a recruiter.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this is where practice is key, right? Because the thing is, I look at interviews the way I look at SATs or any other kind of final that maybe you've taken in school, right? You are a great mathematician. You know math really, really well. You can count and add and subtract and multiply better than anybody you know. That's great. At work, in action, you're at the top of your game. Now you have to prove it, and you have to prove it in a test environment, so to speak, the interview, and you have to deliver the information in a way that can be received by the person you're talking to. This is why practice, as well as the recruiter prep call, as well as any of that study, looking at the careers page, looking at interview prep guidance companies share, all of those things is critical. Because again, you can be the best mathematician in the world, but if I'm not able to understand your expertise and it's not kind of shared with me in a way during the interview that I can make sense of as your interviewer, it may not be as successful. So practice, practice, practice. This is a great reason to just maybe take a couple of interviews that you're not 100% sure. You don't have to be all in with a company to decide to have a conversation with them, right? It's like dating. I'll go on a few dates. I'll have a few drinks. Then I'll decide who I'm going to marry or join as an employee. So definitely recommend practice, study, and talk to your recruiters 100%.
There we go. Well, so Arlo, it looks like he has another question. He said, relating back to the previous one, on the opposite side of things, if you know very little or almost nothing about a question, how do you handle it or answer it gracefully without just saying, I don't know?
No, that's a great question. And I guess here's what I like to hear. And I've been in this situation and I've actually had to say, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. Here's what I'm looking for, though, as the interviewer. Tell me how you would go about finding the information. Gosh, I haven't used that tool. I don't have experience running a report like that. Here's what I would do. The first thing I would do is I would check with my peers. I would find a person on the team who has expertise there. I would look for training docs so I could get up to speed on the tool in question, or, I'm obviously totally making up a scenario. But the key there is figuring out not necessarily do you have the right knowledge, because we all have room for growth and learning. Are you smart enough to figure out how to find the answer? That to me is a more powerful answer than the know-it-all who just knows everything and is able to rattle off solutions without any thought.
Yeah, I agree. That's perfect. Okay, so Brian also has a question, I think, that ties in well with Josh's question. So Brian's wondering, do you have tips for someone who might be looking to find their first role in a new career field and how they can stand out from other candidates? And Josh also asked, what are your best interview tips? So I think those two can go hand in hand.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great question. So I think couple of things. The first thing that I would caveat here as far as, first role in a new career. Excuse me. Are we talking about, and I'll answer it both ways. So you could be a new grad coming right out of school and literally have no work experience. So that's one scenario. The other could be, hey, I've been an accountant, for 10 years, and I went back to school to learn how to code, and now I want to come be a developer. In both cases, for the most part, we are hiring you because of your potential. We're hiring you because you have kind of the right educational background. You've got the right, we believe that there's an opportunity to teach you, guide you, groom you, get you up to speed on whatever. So I think the key thing there is focus on, here's what has prepared me for this new career step, whether it's been academic or internships or side projects or volunteer work, whatever it might be. And then here's how fast I learn. We're hiring you on that potential. We're hiring you because we think we can, get you up to speed quickly on this new career or this new thing. And so don't be afraid to just embrace that and kind of show off what a fast learner you are, if that makes sense. And then to Josh's question, best interview tips. I mean, I really think it's just be inquisitive, be really confident in what you do know, but don't be afraid to admit what you don't know. And so it kind of goes back again to that, I don't have an answer, but I know how to find it, or here's what I would do to find it. Like those are the key things that separate, I think kind of the know-it-alls on the one end, and then the folks at the opposite end who know nothing and don't want to fix that. So kind of want to be somewhere in the middle there.
So, Amy, looks like we have time for one more question. It comes from David. He wants to know, how do you go about asking for interview feedback on your answer? So, I'm assuming that means you answer a question, you want some feedback on that. How do you go about doing that?
It's a tricky one, right? Because, again, so many companies are, have this I don't want to say anti-feedback, that doesn't sound right. We have this policy, a lot of big companies have this policy where we just don't give feedback. I think, I've done it this way, because I'm like you, David. Like, I want to know, I'm instant gratification girl. I want to know that you like me. I want to know this is going well. Like, I have all these same questions. And so I think it's the right way to position that, and this is how I say it, is, was that what you were looking for? Is there anything more that I can give you that would help flesh out that answer? Did I go a direction that didn't make sense? Do I need to go back? And, so you can kind of position it that way. If things are going well, you'll probably get the no, that's great, and the smile and the nod. So that's a form of feedback. If it's like, actually, I needed you to go here, well, now you have a chance to fix it. So you can get back onto the right track and kind of address the question they were looking for. And so I don't know if that's exactly the answer that you were looking for, but I think that's a way to kind of make sure you're on the right track. Because I think that's ultimately what the goal is, right? We want kind of that immediate feedback so that we know we're answering the right questions, we're giving the right data that they can safely say we're hireable.
Yep. And David agrees. He said, yes, you said
awesome. It. Love that.
Awesome. Well, guys, unfortunately, we are running low on time. There was one more question, and Ba-In, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but feel free to stick around afterwards. And if anybody else has any unanswered questions, feel free, stick around, give us your information at the end of the meeting, and we will send some emails, or you can, again, feel free to email us at info@edgelink.com. We're happy to answer the rest of your questions. Amy did mention it is like a dating game. Until you figure out which one you want to marry. She also mentioned you can't say no to something that you don't have. So until you have an offer in hand, you can't negotiate. And next week, we're going to be talking about those negotiations. So please stay with us. We'll be sending out another email on the link so you can sign up for next week's meeting as well. Amy, once again, thank you so much for joining us today. I know we had some technical difficulties, but we pushed through just like we always do. Thanks, everybody. Look out for some emails from us. We have a survey. We'd love to hear from you about how the meeting went, if you learned anything good, and if there's anything else that we can touch on in future meetings or future sessions. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for staying patient with us.